Hey, my name's Arielle, and you're listening to Rock at Night.
Yeah. Are you ready? Hey, tonight I'm gonna take you on a little trip. We're going down south by the mighty Mississippi. I'm gonna take you to a place where lights never dim. Bring your mother, your brother, and your best friend. I'm gonna show you where they dance out in the street. They'll tell you all about your body heat. Not gonna talk about it, just gonna do it. Get on down, if you feel up good now. Get on down.
This is Anita Stewart, and we're talking to Arielle, who is a guitar prodigy. She's coming out with a new album. I think this will be your 9th album, right?
Yeah.
So it's titled Analog Girl in a Digital World. It's going to be released on May 7th this year. Of course, we're going to be putting up the links so you can pre-order the album on CD, vinyl, or digital. And I did just take a listen to the new single, Peace of Mind, which has already been unofficially released on YouTube. And it's going to be officially released this Friday, February 12th. So the Arielle signature guitar is your project, which is coming right up. 4 different types of guitars that are based on your two-tone, which is something that you built with some collaboration with a friend of yours. So let's just go ahead and open this up, and you can tell us a little bit about the 4 guitars. Actually, I'm looking at them on Facebook right now, and I can't pick a favorite. So tell us a little bit about how that whole project started.
Sure. Well, the 4 that you're looking at right now, I made a Facebook post today, and Instagram post about some of the different prototypes that I've made over the years or have had made to get to the point we're at now. Two-tone was an idea that I had inspired by Brian May, since he made his guitar when he was 16 with his dad. I wanted to have a cool story like his. I wanted to have a guitar that no one else had, that was unique and custom to me and what I felt I wanted and needed to have in an instrument. So I had a friend named Patrick, and he had made a few guitars, kind of amateur on the side. And I asked him, hey, could we make a guitar for me? He said, yeah, absolutely. So we went back and forth with designs. He would draw one, I would draw one. And eventually I drew two-tone, and we started building two-tone from scratch. It wasn't a parts guitar. It wasn't me tracing other guitars. It was just hand drawn and hand done. So it took about 6 months. And the first guitar we had, I believe, was in 2007 of two-tone. And took a little bit longer to finish. And he actually ended up disappearing. It's a very long story, but I can't find him anymore. He kept saying, oh, we need to hurry and need to get this done. And he disappeared. And so I've been carrying on the guitar. I never thought it would be any sort of a guitar line. And I definitely didn't think it would be at this point. I just kept trying to recreate the guitar and what I believed at the time was making it better. So the first design that I have was from 2000, I don't even know. I think 2009, 2010, and that's the silver one. I've named Silver, and each variation in color and guitar has a different spec. And about 5 years ago, I kept being asked by my fans, how do I get a guitar? How do I get a guitar? And I was like, well, I didn't know you wanted one. I just thought it was just me here, playing these guitars. And I thought it was selfish. No one else could play one. So about 3 years ago, I decided, my friend and I, new friend in Nashville, we're going to make these guitars one by one, as many as we could in a month, which would probably be no more than 1 or 2. And that would be it, just be my own guitar line, and people could buy them if they wanted. And I was on the road. My longtime friend Brian May was in town, and we had lunch. Asked what was going on, and I told him, hey, I'm building guitars with a friend, and we're gonna have our own line. And he said, well, who's doing it for you? And I said, oh, I'm just doing it myself. And he said, well, why doesn't Brian May Guitars put out the guitar for you? So that's what started it. It was 3 years ago. And since then, we've made this guitar what it is now. It's not a replica, of course. It's its own variation, just like all the other ones, really, that has had a lot to do with Brian May looking at what he believed to be the best specifications of my guitar and also of his guitar. And we've combined his and my guitar, as well as some new features to create this guitar that is a labor of love. And I'm very excited and kind of afraid to have other people playing it, because in the entire time I've had this guitar, I've never seen anyone else play it other than my own. It's going to be very weird seeing videos and pictures of other people playing my guitar. So
Is the, let me ask you this, is it lighter than most guitars? Did you design it that way?
Yes, absolutely. That's very important to me. I'm not very large. I'm barely 5 foot. And
Right.
having a 10-pound guitar, as anybody knows, is painful after a while, especially when you're on the road and playing after a couple hours. I mean, your shoulder's done for a few days. So the wood that I use, that I used on two-tone, is called limba. And we use the lighter variation. There's black and white limba. And unfortunately, we couldn't source the black limba, even though it's from the same tree. So we have white limba, which tends to be a little bit lighter than your average guitar that features mahogany or anything of that nature. So they're quite light. It's actually lighter than my original guitar. So it's very comfortable. It can fit a guy the size of Brian May, who's I think he's around 6'2" or 6'3". I don't know, he's quite tall. Works for him, and then it works for someone my size too.
I think if I was going to pick a favorite, I would pick the one with the lightning bolts across,
Yeah.
across the neck. But, I'm a fan of orange. I love orange and bright colors, but, that lightning kind of, for me, it supersedes the whole design. I really like that one. So let's talk about your collaboration with Brian May, because you've known him quite a long time, and you were involved in a project of his called We Will Rock You, which featured the music of Queen. Can you tell us how that all came about?
Sure. So I met Brian May right around 2007, and he had a book that came out that was featuring a lot of his brand new work. He had just gotten his PhD in astrophysics, and I was living in LA at the time, going to Musicians Institute in Hollywood. He was stopping by Hollywood on Sunset Boulevard. There's a store called The Soup, Book Soup. That's right, Book Soup. And I showed up with my guitar, and I was like, I'm going to be friends with Brian May. That's going to be it. And we ended up becoming friends, which was really neat. And we became pen pals for about a year and a half. And he had mentioned that there was a musical that was going on in London, which I did know about. And it's a play off of their music. It's a story, a real musical based around the music. It's interesting, and I thought it was pretty well done. And of course, they have live musicians playing it, and him knowing that I could play Queen stuff. I've studied the heck out of that and knew how to play everything. And he's like, hey, you should audition, really sit in and see if this is something that you'd be interested in. So sure enough, I get my crazy butt on a plane, and I'm headed to England. I'd never even been there. And I was, at that point, I was 18 years old, going to England to live by myself after never being there. Thinking about it now, I'm just like, wow, I really, I don't know what I was doing. But anyway, I got there, and he had me sit in, and it's interesting how they do it. They have wings, so you don't actually see the musicians most of the time. There's very steep stairs. You sit above the audience and get to play the music. And they're amazing musicians. I think it was Tina Turner's guitar player was one of them. And you have musicians from amazing histories. So it was a really cool experience to be able to play at We'll Rock You.
So let's talk a little bit about your history, because you grew up in New Jersey, Hawaii, and California, and it's almost like when I listen to your music, I feel like I'm in a time warp, that you've gone way back into the classic rock genre. And I'm reminded of so much other music, even though yours is quite unique. So I'm thinking of the 70s. How did that love for that sound happen with you? And what's your earliest recollections of music and picking up a guitar?
That's a good question. Well, I love that you said that, and I'm actually honored, because to me, one of the things that my fans have hung in there with me with this is that when you see me live, I really run the gamut of influences and things that I like to do, be it a jazz, kind of more traditional jazz approach to the guitar, or maybe I'll do kind of a harder rock song, and then I throw a little country in there sometimes, just influenced. And I always thought it was some. I mean, you listen to Billy Joel and the Beatles, Queen. They've always had a way of expanding their songwriting, and it just so happened that the song was produced in a different way. That was I don't know, in a box. But I've never liked to be in a box. But I've always wanted to capture the essence of a time period. And when I think of the 60s and 70s, to me, that's a magical time in music. And just like with the guitar, that I've tried to look at and find different things that I like and don't like about it, and what is it that makes it sound that way. I've done the exact same thing with music of the 60s and 70s. How does it work that every time I turn it on, I feel like it's so magical, like I've never even heard it before, even though I've heard the album a billion times, that it makes me feel the same way every time. And I can't say the same for a lot of the modern music. And I've been trying to figure out why for decades now. And I feel like I'm getting closer. So thank you for saying what you did, because it means I'm getting somewhere, while also trying to maintain my own identity within it, as you mentioned. But ever since I was really, really young, I've always listened to music a few generations before the one I was in. So having older parents than most of the other kids in my school, instead of growing up with Backstreet Boys and Britney Spears in the 90s, I grew up with doo-wop from the 40s and 50s, and some jazz from that period as well. And then as I got older, I just kind of went up. So I started off with the 40s, and I moved up to the 50s and 60s and 70s, and it's been a really, really fun journey.
One of the things that's pretty predominant with a lot of that 60s and 70s music is that just the craft of songwriting, writing a good song seemed to be so important to those musicians back then. And also their ability to be able to write a song that's timeless. I mean, when you look at some of those songs back then, like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, we're talking about like just classic rock and roll. You could take those same songs and you could sing them in a jazz style. You could sing them, you could sing them in a folk style. You can take them like that, what's the name of that band? Jukebox.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. That band can take all those songs, those rock songs, and turn them into jazz or turn them into doo-wop or whatever they're doing. And those songs still have the hooks. You still want to sing along. It's amazing. And I don't think a lot of the songwriters now, I can't say a lot of them, but yeah, maybe there's something that's changed, and that quality of writing that timeless piece is not as predominant. So that's just kind of my take on it, but somebody else might have a different idea, So tell me this, how do you think, since you've been in music, that things have changed for women in the music business? I know you have a lot to say about this.
How have things changed for women in the music business? Oof. I don't want this to sound so bad, but I don't feel like it's changed that much. And I say that what I'm referring to is there's an awareness now that might be a bit different, that women do get treated differently than men in the music business as well as others. But since here I am as a musician, we'll just refer to that. When I was growing up, a woman that was a guitar player was not really a thing. Social media, I mean, Facebook, or there was MySpace first. I don't think I had one of those till I was like maybe 15 or so. So I didn't have any online influences. It was really whatever musical, tangible influence I had. It wasn't, through social media. So it was difficult because you didn't know about the ones that were like me, or, the lesser known female musicians. And then I got a lot of flack from the guys. Like, I would want to join a band and they wouldn't let me because I was a girl. And they're like, well, it's not cool to have a girl in a rock band. I'm like, I think it's kind of neat. Like, nah, it makes it all prissy. And I struggled with that. And then what ended up happening was women became a commodity. Then it's like, oh, I want a woman in because they got to be hot. And then it was, well, I want to have a woman in there because that means that I'm like gender, I approve of all genders and I'm not sexist. And I think we're not at the point yet. And that's just with the musicians. We're not even talking about the business. Of course, still in the biggest guitar companies and also in most of the big record labels, women aren't normally running it. They're not running the bigger ends of it. And so what ends up happening is they're targeting women a lot of times with products and with whatever they're putting out, yet they don't have any on their team, as well as women on the radio. I mean, they say less than 5% of the people on the radio in any genre are women. So there's still issues. I think they're just more known. And the only point that it's going to be neutral is at the point that we literally do not care. And this isn't a conversation. So I believe that it hasn't grown that much, other than the fact that we know about the Weinsteins and things like that, which is extremely prevalent in the music industry. I could tell you stories that you could probably imagine easily, but maybe some people wouldn't. So it's
I think it's that way in business just in general, but the music business especially, because it's like you can't break through unless you have some real powerful connections. You just can't. And then of course, like you said, being a female guitarist in a rock band, and then for a while it was trendy to have the female singing lead, and so on and so forth. Now it's kind of like, okay, you need to have a female bass player. So it's whatever the trend happens to be at the moment. Oh, that band I was thinking about, Postmodern Jukebox. That's
there it is.
Yeah, there it is. So let me ask you this, and this is another interesting question to think about. How important is it to you to remain an independent artist, and why?
Well, I was signed to a record label, and I don't think that's inherently bad. You just have to understand it, and you can read books and say, oh, don't sign a deal, but until you truly understand why and what their benefits are having a record label versus not, then I think it's fair to say one should not sign a contract. I was one of those people that did anyway. and ended up in a really bad situation. So at this point, I'm not super concerned with having a record label. I believe that's typically the thing that people refer to as being independent, is without a label, or without a major label anyway. That being said, though, having a team is very important, and it's one of the things that I'm working on. So it's important to me, whether I'm independent or not, that I retain the musical and personal integrity that I bring to the music and to my audience. That's the most important thing, be it I write about things that I think are genuine and feel are genuine and true to me in my experience. I write songs without contemplating whether they're hits. I don't tune my vocals or alter my performances in a way that's non-authentic. Actually, I don't at all. I just play it again if I feel it's not good. And those things, I dress the way that I want. All those things are important to me. And as long as I retain that, and I can have good people around me, then being independent or not independent doesn't matter, as long as the integrity is there.
Right. Yeah, those are good. Those are just good ways of being a musician. And not compromising, I think, is really the most important. And I think if everybody could uphold that, there would be a lot better things happening in the music business right now. Let me ask you about your albums. And were these mostly in the very beginning kind of DIY efforts? Did you have a lot of collaborations and help? And how important was it to you to get the music out?
Well, since I've been creating music, a lot of things have changed. My first EP, it was very difficult to get on iTunes. There weren't many sources of being able to get, and now anyone can get on iTunes and what we have now as Spotify. But before, when I was first putting out albums, it was extremely difficult. So they were DIY, and that's why some of them are very hard to find. And I should share them at some point with people, knowing, hey, these are really old and not what I'm doing now. Sometimes it's hard for people to understand that, re-releasing music that they've never heard. Like, wow, she backtracked like 15 years.
Right.
But at this point, it's very important to me to get music out. Not the recent one before this one, Suspension Dimension, but prior to that, every single album was done by myself. I recorded them at home with my own gear, and that's how I did it. I was kind of a control freak, and I programmed drums, and I was just experimenting. I was living in LA. That was what everyone was doing, and just recording from home for the past, I'd say 8 or 9 years. And then in the past 5, I shifted my approach because I realized that I wasn't creating music that I thought represented what I was capable of or what I want to be seen as in the future. So I started shifting more towards what I'm doing now, which is recording live, having one take, not using a click track, and no tuning of any kind, and those kinds of things I mentioned before, really taking the vintage approach to recording. But it's been in the past 5 years that I've been less of a perfectionist control freak in the comfort of my own home to really just wanting to get an album out every year and having it be great, but also knowing that even if it's not perfect, I can just write a better one, hopefully the next time.
The rig rundown from, what is it, Premier Guitar? I just happened to watch that, and I can see how you were very exacting about your specifications about what kind of guitars you work with and your equipment and everything. It's pretty impressive, actually. So I'd really like to watch the rig rundown just to get an idea of how an artist thinks about the equipment they're using and how they create their music. Now, on your bio, You have played with people like Hart, Joan Jett, Graham Nash, Country Joe McDonald, Joe Bonamassa, Guns N' Roses, so many people. Who do you think were some of the most fun and why?
Well, my version of fun is kind of like an elderly woman's probably, which is where I can learn the most.
Mhm.
I'm a bit boring when it comes to fun. I'm just like, teach me all you know. As far as, I mean, everyone's fun in their own way for sure. I mean, some are a bit more neurotic than others, but I'd say my favorite collaboration that I've gotten to have, as far as opening acts and getting to play with other people, would definitely be Vince Gill. He's
Oh, okay. Yeah.
you wouldn't expect it necessarily, and a lot of people aren't really familiar with some of his work outside of the U.S. But he's got like, I don't know how many Grammys the guy has, over 10 for sure. In country music, he's a very traditional country artist, and although I'm not as big of a fan of country as he is, he's an incredible triage of talent with his singing, his songwriting, and his guitar. And his approach is always less is more. And his approach to life is less is more too. In many ways, he's so very humble, and he treats everyone the same way. And he doesn't worry about things that I'm crazy about, like, I don't know how good my monitors sound, and they're not sounding good, and I'm going to worry about it all night. He just lets it go. He's such a wise guy, and I've loved working with him and learning from him. I think that stands out to me the most.
So tell us a little bit about the creation of the latest album. And this is going to be Analog Girl in a Digital World. The album's going to be released May 7th, 2021, this year. And of course, when we write this up for the website, we're going to make sure that we include the link so people can pre-order the album. But tell us how that came to be. Is there a specific concept in mind, and what can people expect to hear?
Yeah. Well, thanks for putting that up, by the way. As far as the album, it was a concept I had a few years ago. I finished the album about a year and a half ago, and typically what I've done in the past with albums is I haven't done concept albums. I've got what I believed were the strongest songs I would experiment with live, and people would tell me which ones were their favorites, and I throw those ones on the albums, and I would pick what I believed were the strongest songs based on that. This time I wanted to do a concept album that I wasn't worried about whether they were my strongest songs or anything like that. What I was concerned with was if I had a cohesive piece that went together and was authentic to what I was going through at the time. And that's what I did. It was a different approach. And then I was sitting in my my flat in the UK, and I had hardly anything. I think I was sitting on a stool, and that was the only piece of furniture I had in my entire place. And I was writing Digital World. And I started thinking about, because I think about it all the time. I'm very fortunate enough to know what it's like without smartphones. A lot of young people today don't know what that's like. I didn't grow up with them. The internet was a thing when I was born, but Google had just started, and
Right.
I had to read books to learn things. And when I was playing guitar, I didn't learn on YouTube. I had to read books. I went to school. I watched videos, VHS tapes over and over and over again, and then DVDs over and over. I bought everything because I had to. It was a very different time, and so I wanted to have a place for people that are like me, that either didn't get to experience their favorite time periods, or that did get to and feel like they can't anymore because we're at a different place in time. And right or wrong, I've tried to create another option for people to have a vintage approach but I'm still alive, so you can see me. I'm really trying to carry the torch of the old school. So I recorded half in tape. I wanted to experience that and see, you know, what flavors and tones that I could get from recording that way, as well as what level of musicality and ability do you need to have in order to record an entire song in one take, not just from me, but also from the musicians, and how to have that kind of level of ability with working with other people, some of whom I'd never met before until that day. And to finish the entire thing, we finished it about 5 days total. And so that
Wow.
was the old school approach. And
Right. And crafting a song and doing it in one take, I think, is refreshing. It's, to me, it's more real. I don't know, it just, to me, I would prefer that. That's like, you know, back in the day when we used to go and hear new music or hear some local musicians that we liked, we went to the coffee house. There wasn't a second take. You heard songs sometimes as they were being done for the first time.
wow.
And, you know, that's really cool. And what you were describing about young artists of today watching YouTube and picking up how to play music, I think of that as more instant, you know, like an instant cup of coffee really, to me, isn't really coffee, you know, it has to be brewed and percolated. So maybe that's a good analogy.
Very good.
But we're running out of time, but I wanted to ask you a couple more questions. What are some of the good and bad points of both Nashville and Austin, and which place do you like better and why?
That's a good question. Well, as I think I mentioned before, I'm somebody who has moved around. I was following the music, so wherever the music was, that's where I'd be. So that included Los Angeles, which I spent over a decade in, London, of course, Austin, Texas, Nashville. There's a few that I may have missed, but those are kind of the main ones that one would think of. So I've paid my dues in all of them. And because of that, I'm a little bit more jaded now and burnt out and would rather just like live on a farm in the middle of nowhere. That being said, as a musician, if the pros and cons of Nashville, I moved to Nashville from Los Angeles, drove in my car in 2015. And I knew nothing about it other than it was an up and coming place. And it had more songwriting to it. It was more about the song and the collaboration instead of perhaps mainstream pop and hip hop and those kinds of things, and more about the production, as I believe Los Angeles was at the time. So I moved and I really enjoyed a lot of it. Lots of collaboration, lots of songwriting happening all the time, all over the place. Some people just have like a 9-to-5 job. They have 5 sessions a day. It's insane. I do one and I'm burnt out for the day. If you're a songwriter and you're somebody who wants mostly, you know, pop country acts to hear it, even though some people say there's other genres, for the most part, the industry is country based. It's just how it is. Country, you know, pop country. If you're a songwriter and you do country music, it's a great place. If you're a musician, you're going to have lots of great musicians, but a lot of competition. There's also expensive prices, of course. Prices are going up in Nashville. There's a lot of people moving there. There's a lot of crime. But at the other hand, you have access to beautiful studios. You have the industry there. You have, you know, some TV shows that are there. I got to do TV show Nashville, being a musician. And you have access to incredible music stores and gear. I mean, they've got the most incredible collection of vintage gear. So where there's a group of people that do the same thing as you, you're going to have a good time.
Right.
But then Austin, I believe it's less about the industry. There's really not a big music industry there as far as record labels, publishing companies, and the like. But what you have are a more eclectic group of people There's obviously the Texas blues scene, lots of blues, and the fans love the music. People come out to the shows. In Nashville, it's a little bit harder to play gigs because everyone's a musician. In Austin, you have the tech world as well as what they call it the music capital of the world. I'm not entirely sure why, but lots of music going on, lots of venues. People come out to see you. And I believe that people as far as musicians and the artists are more authentic because they're not concerned with who's coming to the show, because record labels aren't going to the shows. It's definitely more of a people town with the music. It's also
okay.
expensive. And it's a lot smaller than Nashville as far as access to studios and also musicians. It's a very, very small community. And so, everyone knows everyone, which could be good or bad depending on on your
Right.
reputation. So those are my experiences. I've had great experiences in both. However, I'd say as a music town, I would pick Austin over Nashville for sure, for my personal goals.
Right, right. And this is our final question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years and then 10 years?
Well, I think about this a lot, and the answer shifts because I think I become more aware of how I want to impact people and also the planet. I would like to be seen as something like how I see Vince Gill, somebody who sings and writes music and plays guitar last, but sings songs and writes songs that are authentic to the human experience and not hold back. I want to, I'd love to be playing theaters, a couple of seat theaters, beautiful theaters with nice sound, with a big band of at least 5 people. And I would also like to be making my guitars. I'd like to be on the forefront of protecting and reforesting these tonewood trees we're cutting down for our instruments and not replenishing. I'd like to change the way that we do that, and that guitar companies are cutting down these trees and be more conscious of that. I'd like to be on the forefront of that and make my mark and give back in that way, as well as work on keeping music in schools. I'd love to make an album at least once a year and continue to refine the live element of the way that I record, and tour around a bunch. I'd like some chickens.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wouldn't eat them or anything. Just to look at them. I think they're very cute. So,
Well,
yeah.
chickens are good if you're living on that farm out in the middle of nowhere, because then you get eggs from chickens. So that's helpful. But yeah, that might be something that you want to consider in 10 years after you've had enough of the city life, is going to the country and still writing your music or having your own studio and
Yeah, growing trees, a garden, have chickens, and make music. I mean, that's a
and
life.
you could mentor other artists as well, which would be really good.
I'd love that. I would love to do that. I'd be like, when I think of the producers now that are now in their mid 70s that are passing on, very sad. I'd like to be that person that, when you want to have a 60s or 70s sound, you go to Arielle. Like, I think of Jeff Lynne when I think about that now. Thankfully, he's still alive. But I want to be that person. I'd love to work with musicians, especially women and singer-songwriters, to do the same thing. That would be really cool.
Right. Wow. Something to aspire to.
Yeah.
So Arielle, I want to thank you so much for interviewing with us, and wow, giving us all of your amazing insights. You're so brilliant for someone so young, and I've learned something just by asking you these questions. So, but I want to wish you the best, especially with this new release of your album. And everybody, when we write this up, we're going to be talking about the album, the guitars, providing links to pre-order, and I'm really excited to see where this all goes. This is very cool. And we are going to be doing a review of the songs on the album as well. So we will make sure that that goes up on Rocket Night as well. So,
Well, thank you very much. And I appreciate your time, firstly, and also your thoroughness with the questions. You ask really deep and unique questions that tell me that you've looked in and know about me in a really cool way. So thank you.
well, thank you. And hey, let's see what happens when this album comes out.
Yeah.
And Analog Girl in a Digital World. And we'll see what you're doing next and make sure we have you back again. Okay?
Thank you very much.
And you have a great day.
You too. We'll talk soon. Bye.
You're listening to Rock at Night.
The introductory song, Get On Down, is from blues artist Billy Bass Alford. Look for his music at ReverbNation.com.